Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. This is another transfer special, this time with very special guest Alex Milne, the national content editor for the Daily Express, former Daily Mirror journalist, also worked at the likes of Sky Sports and Love Sport Radio, and of course Spurs fan. Alex, how are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you, Chris. I do wish that this first meeting could be under happier circumstances, maybe celebrating a signing or even celebrating an outgoing, but unfortunately, it looks like it's not to be today, but thank you for having me on.
Alex, we've got 4 days, 6 hours to go before this transfer window closes. How confident are you, as a journalist, as a Spurs fan, that Tottenham are going to get some signings over the line?
I mean, as a Spurs fan, when it comes to signings, you can never be too confident because you end up with days like today where you have a player who you're 99% sure is going to become a Tottenham player, suddenly slipping through the net at the last minute. But on a positive note, I think we have no option. There have to be at least 1 or 2 signings. In a dream world, maybe there'll be 3 through. But I'm still pretty confident we'll get 2 through at least. Whether it's the 2 that we want is another story. But I think at least a central midfielder and hopefully either a winger or a right wing back will still be coming through the door. But I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about that later.
Alex, I've been talking all week throughout this January transfer window to journalists, and you've all said exactly the same thing: 2 or 3 signings. Who are they going to be?
Well, not Adama Traore, that's for sure. The one that currently is looking closest to getting over the line is this Sofiane Amrabat. From what we can gather today, it looks like he's kind of potentially closing in on a deal. It's one that, doesn't really get the pulse racing. I think from what we've seen from him, he's not the creative attacking midfielder that necessarily we're crying out for. He's more of a box-to-box or a holding midfielder. And there's an argument to be had that Spurs already have plenty of those. Having said that, he's a player that we believe that Antonio Conte likes. It seems like him and Paratici have agreed he's a player who can push the club forward and is one that will do a good job for us. So as a Spurs fan, I guess you've got to trust in Conte. There's not too many complaints you can have about what he's been doing so far. So in that aspect, hopefully that'll come over the line and be successful. Of course, I know we're going to talk later about Luis Diaz. That's one that certainly seems more up in the air. Looks like it could go either way at the moment. He's certainly an exciting prospect. But whether or not that will get done and get pushed over the line is very much remains to be seen. And as we know from Tottenham, on transfer deadline day, anything could happen. We could be set for a few last-minute surprises. We know we're a club that leave it late. Some would say too late at times, but it has in the past provided us with a few nice surprises. So from an optimistic perspective, hopefully there's another name that none of us know about yet, but, could just pop up at any minute now.
Alex, let's go back to Luis Diaz. One of your colleagues at the Express in the last hour has released an article stating that Tottenham are optimistic about signing Luis Diaz after the Traore transfer has collapsed. In other reports, it states that the player is prepared to accept the move to Spurs, but clubs must find an agreement on the fee. Spurs are far away from the evaluation. Now, as we've heard in the last couple of days, Tottenham Hotspur did submit an official bid for Luis Diaz. How confident are you that Tottenham could pull off such a fantastic signing?
I'm getting more confident. It certainly seems like there initially was a bit of a gap in the evaluation of the player, but we all know that the sooner it gets to transfer deadline day, the more that gap may just close and we might find an agreement somewhere. I mean, look, we've got money to spend now. We know that the 20, 25 mil, maybe even 30 mil we were going to splash on Adama Traore is now not going to happen. So there shouldn't be an excuse in terms of money. There should be the money available and the funds available to bring in this player if he's really what we think we need. He's certainly a promising prospect. We've seen glimpses of him scoring against Man City at the Etihad. We know that he's this explosive, exciting winger. The only question from my perspective would be, is he really the priority? We know we've got Son coming back very soon. We've already got the likes of Kane, Lucas, Bergwijn. Lucas and Bergwijn do split opinion, but we know that they can do a job, as we've seen. Especially Lucas has impressed this season, and we know what Bergwijn did against Leicester. So from that perspective, you've got to think, well, is it a wise move to spend out 40, 50 mil on this kid when we should be prioritising maybe a right wing back, a centre back, a central midfielder, like I touched on before? But there's no doubt he'd be an exciting signing. The only worry for me is how the likes of Bryan Gil have done since coming in, because I thought he would fulfil that role. He was a really exciting signing. We'd heard lots of good things. I saw a bit of him playing for the Spanish national team and for Eibar last season. Really likes the look of him. And we saw, I think, glimpses of that in the Europa Conference League earlier this season, where there was a bit of a buzz when he got on the ball. There was certainly sort of a feel that he could really push on. And I thought by this stage, by January, he'd be knocking on the door for a first team place and really push on. It hasn't happened for whatever reason. I don't see what the benefit would be of loaning him back to Spain. I think if we're going to cut our losses now with him, we'd either sell him or loan him out maybe to a championship or a lower team in the Premier League to get him a bit of experience in England. I don't really see the benefit of these rumours of him going to Valencia and getting comfortable again in Spain, adjusting to La Liga. I just don't see how that's going to benefit his game in the English leagues. But who knows? Obviously, Diaz is a bit older. He's potentially a slightly more exciting prospect. And we'll just have to wait and see in the coming days what developments are. But he's certainly one that would excite Tottenham fans, perhaps more than an Amrabat or a more steady but potentially necessary signing.
Alex, you mentioned Sofran Amrabat, of course, who plays for Fiorentina. Are you surprised by this target? Because I spoke to a Serie A journalist or an expert earlier on today, and when I asked the question, is he better than Harry Winks, Oliver Skipp and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg? He said no. He said this is not going to be a great signing for Spurs. Are you surprised by this?
Well, I think this is the thing. As I said, it's not an exciting signing. I think we've all seen the slightly cruel, unfair memes and jokes about a central midfield pairing of Skipp, Højbjerg, being a bit like a Tesco meal deal that's like a ham sandwich, ready salted crisps and water, which is very unfair because in their own right, they're all very good players. But as a trio or as a double, obviously they don't get you off your seat. And Amrabat is another one of them. It sounds like to me he had a very good season last year, has fallen out of the manager this season, and for one reason or another, he's on the bench and he's just not the flavour of the month in Italy. Whether Conte can get the best out of him remains to be seen. We know that he can do. We've seen him improve almost every Tottenham player, I'd argue, so far this season. So there's no saying that with the right motivational tactics, with the right role in the team, he could be a really shrewd signing. It sounds like he's not going to cost a huge amount. I think there's about 17 million figures being bandied about, which shouldn't be beyond the realms of what Spurs can do. But it's just a bit of seems like, again, as Spurs tend to do, a bit of an anticlimax, almost like he's been plucked as fourth or fifth or sixth choice on this list of targets we had, mainly because he's got a connection with Paratici, some would argue. Obviously, you're very wary of writing him off right now, but I don't think there'd be too many Spurs fans jumping up and down with joy and delight if he does get pushed through. But let's wait and see. We obviously got to give him a chance. Any player at the moment adding to our squad, you'd argue, is a good thing because we're so stretched, especially in that position. But yeah, I think he'd find it quite difficult to win over fans unless he gets off to a really good start.
It's very hard, though, Alex, isn't it? The fact that the Spurs fans get excited thinking we're going to sign someone like Frank Kessie in this January window, and then we're linked, and now looks like we're going to be signing Amrabat. They're very different players.
Yeah, and Kessie was one that I've always really liked watching. You've seen him at AFCON this month, and he's looked really good. For AC Milan, he's certainly impressed in recent times, and he was one who looked a genuine possibility. We know he's out of contract this summer. Sure, there are other big teams in for him, but I don't see why he wouldn't fancy a shot at Spurs, at linking up with Conte. And then it's all gone very quiet on that front, almost as if Spurs have thought, well, yeah, maybe there's a bit of competition for him. Maybe we don't want to wait till the summer. Let's just get in, a replacement who's maybe not quite at his level. And yeah, like you touched on, I think Kessie would have been a more exciting signing. Whether we come in for him again in the next few days, again, anything could happen. It could easily be that we suddenly make a last-ditch move for Kessie on deadline day, and that could well go through. But yeah, Amrabat, let's just wait and see. But hey, it'd be good to get something done at least, something signed and on the dotted line rather than falling through as it normally does.
Well, talking about falling through, of course, Alex, you touched on Adama Traore. He is now, just in the middle of signing for Barcelona. Done deal, and here we go. It says Fabrizio Romano, a buy option of £30 million plus bonuses. Barcelona will cover 100% salary until June. Are you disappointed?
Do you know what? I'm not disappointed at not signing Adama Traore. I'm disappointed that we've wasted this much time on a player who, it seems, didn't even want to play right wing back. I think if you'd have asked Spurs fans before the January transfer window, would you take Adama Traore? I predict there'd be pretty much a 50-50 split because he's that kind of divisive player. We've seen it against Spurs time and time again. He is exciting. He's torn our right backs to shreds on occasions. I remember early in this season against Tanganga, he absolutely ran the show. And we were very lucky to get out of that game with a 1-0 win because, as we've seen time and time again, he does all the good stuff. His end product isn't quite there. And he wasted, especially in that game, I remember, chance after chance to whip a good ball in or cut in, and just his end product still isn't there. Again, could Conte get that out of him? Maybe. But as I said, it's not like one of those transfers like the Dybala one, which was left Spurs fans so disappointed because he's not that level of player. But it's the fact that we've left it to now for it to all fall apart when it looked almost certain to be done 1-2 weeks ago. And you've got a question, it's coming out today as David Ornstein reported in The Athletic, that the main reason is because he doesn't want to play at right wing back. Well, how's that not been identified before? How have we got to this stage where we actually didn't click that, oh, maybe he might not want to be playing that position. Maybe he wants to be a right winger. And it all goes back to this Spurs scouting thing of, do we take the personalities of players into consideration? And are we just scouting their physical attributes rather than getting to know the player themselves? And it's just so frustrating because we've wasted so much time already on this one player. He's now slipped under our grasp. And now, honestly, I don't know who we're going to get at right wing back, which is clearly the most pressing concern for me. I mean, Emerson Royale, he's done okay. I actually think he could go on to be quite a good player, but he's maybe not quite ready yet. Matt Doherty, I think we all speak, well, I think everyone's of the same opinion. He's trying his best, but he's just not of a level that we need him to be. So again, it comes back to this. We've now scrambling around last minute for a player who probably was nowhere near the top of a priority list because Traore's fallen from our grasp, and it could have been decided straight away right at the start of the month. We could have put in that phone call, found out what he wanted, where he wanted to play, and if that was the case, then that could have been it straight away. But the life of a Spurs fan and the life of Spurs scouting department is certainly a curious one.
Alex, when you're writing articles for the Daily Express about Spurs, are you fairly favourable towards Spurs or not in the articles?
I try and be as non-biased as I possibly can be. It can be tricky sometimes. And occasionally that frustration does boil over, like today with the Traore thing. I did just kind of want to write a scathing article about Spurs, but I managed to keep a lid on it. Listen, I've been a Spurs fan for over 20 years now, and no matter how much you work at a job, that part of me will never die, you know, the part of it that loves Spurs. I was at the Chelsea game in the press box on Sunday, and it's still a horrible experience having the whole stadium, the Chelsea fans cheering around you, and you've got to try and keep a lid on it and be professional and just write from a non-biased perspective. But yeah, I think over the years, you just kind of learn how to rein it in and maybe keep your personal thoughts for the pub after the game rather than in your articles. But it certainly can be tricky.
Now, Antonio Conte mentioned after the Chelsea game, of course, we've lost to Chelsea 4 times this season, haven't scored a goal, and he said that there's a big quality difference. Alex, this may be a silly question, but what do Tottenham Hotspur need in this transfer window, in the summer transfer window, to be competing in the top 4 again?
Well, I think actually even today, good old Kieran Trippier said it best. He had a chat with Alan Shearer at The Athletic, and when pressed on where Spurs have gone wrong recently, he had one name, Moussa Dembele, and I think the situation with Dembele is just indicative of how the team, it's not been an overnight thing where they've just completely gone from this amazing, vibrant, exciting team under Poch to a complete overturn. But Dembele just sums up the creeping decline of this team. I mean, you've obviously seen Dembele week after week, and he was just incredible for us for the impact he had on game, the way he'd keep the ball, the way he'd turn defence into attack. He was an unbelievable player, and yet it was almost pretty low-key how we signed him, but the way he just almost disappeared to China in January for a pretty miserly fee. We didn't get in an adequate replacement, and it's now, we're seeing the problems with that. It's the same with Erickson. It's the same with Trippier himself. It's the same with Kyle Walker. We let these players go and we just haven't adequately replaced them. But I think Dembele is the number one kind of epitomizes all those problems. And the most frustrating thing about that is I thought Tanguy Ndombele was going to be the heir to Dembele. You know, he's that kind of player, the player who can produce the magic, who can keep a football. On his day, he looks amazing. But the big difference is, and I touched on earlier, the personality. Dembele was a warrior. We saw it in the Battle of the Bridge. We saw him get stuck in. He would die for the shirt. He left everything out there, which is something that Tanguy Ndombele certainly doesn't do, or I've not seen any signs of that. So I think that's what makes it the most frustrating. The one time we did splash out 60 million on a player who we thought, right, this is a man who's going to be in the team for years on end. He'll become our new Moussa Dembele. He'll become that absolute stalwart in the centre. Didn't happen, and it's hugely disappointing. But yeah, like I said, I think a centre midfielder in the mould of Dembele or an Erickson, a creative player, a player who's going to keep the ball. I mean, you were at the game on Sunday, were you, Chris? At the Chelsea game?
Unfortunately, yeah. I absolutely hate that place.
Oh, I mean, tell me about it. Was it one win since 1990? I mean, God.
One win in 32 years. I tell you, the days I've had there, honestly, it's my worst ground to visit.
It's pretty horrible. It's pretty horrible. But I mean, in Chelsea, it pains me to say it, but every single one of their players just looked comfortable on the ball, didn't they? They could find a pass. They weren't flustered. They weren't giving it away. And this is a team who aren't in very good form. This is a team who are nowhere near playing their best. And yet they looked some distance above us in terms of just that confidence on the ball. And we saw it was a fairly even game. And then Hakim Ziyech produced a moment of magic. And we just do not have that at the moment. Other than Kane, other than Son, we don't have that player who's going to pick up a ball, bend it 30 yards into the top corner. We got a team of adequate players who are hardworking, players who are okay, but they just do not have that extra bit of quality. And it's sad. It's sad to see that compared to 3-4 years ago. And that's why you've got to credit Conte for the job he's done so far, because he's done very well at getting out what he can from these players. But we now need to push on and make signings. And whether that happens this month or in the summer remains to be seen. But it's looking more likely for summer, I think.
Alex, do you think if Tottenham didn't do much business in this January transfer window, that Antonio Conte could keep pushing to try and get the best out of the current players?
I think he could. And bear in mind, top four still is not looking anywhere near out of the question. I mean, what are we, 2 points behind United with 2 games in hand, I believe it is. So yeah, it feels like we've had this a few times over the years recently, where we've actually got pretty lucky with the lack of quality opponents in that top four race. I mean, I would still argue that we are at least on the level, if not a bit better than Arsenal and Man United in that battle. So if we can get to the summer and we have achieved Champions League qualification, that would obviously be a sensational achievement, but one that I don't think is out of the question now, just because of how well Conte has done at the start of his reign. I mean, the issue is against quality opposition, like we saw against Chelsea. I don't think we're going to be beating Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, and I hate to say it, I worry about us against Arsenal and United too. But I think we've got enough in our squad now to beat the teams at the bottom of the league, which is where you've seen Arsenal slipping up a bit. I think, for example, we beat Burnley at home, whereas we saw Arsenal couldn't do that at the weekend. So I think Conte will, and I think in the summer is when he's got more of a right to really demand big signings. We all know January is very tricky. As much as we complain about Spurs, as much as I think they could be doing more, it's very difficult. We've only really seen Newcastle making significant signings so far, and we know they've got an endless pot of money at the moment. So it's going to be tricky to get in. Even now, if we get in a few stopgaps, like, for example, an Amrabat, who might not be here in 2 years' time, but might plug a hole from now until the end of the season. I think that's all we can really hope for. But I do think Conte will keep pushing.
Alex, just how hard is it for a club like Spurs to sign in the January transfer window? Because, I must admit, I haven't expected a lot in this January transfer window. But if Spurs want Antonio Conte to have the tools to try and finish in that top four spot, we do need a signing or two to help him out. But how difficult is it, to sign players in this window?
It's extremely difficult. We've seen throughout the last well, let's think 3 or 4 years, there aren't many big deals in the January transfer window. Even the biggest teams in the world really struggle to get those deals over the line. And it's simply because of the precarious position teams find themselves in. I mean, who's going to want to lose a really good quality player right now and have nothing to bring in? This is, again, a bit of a danger with leaving it to the last minute, is that teams do not want to lose one of their star players on deadline day and not have adequate time to replace them. And that's why I think we see more of these deals, more of the Amrabats and the players who are a bit out of favour, but that, you know, are going to be used maybe temporarily until the end of the season. We're not going to be in for the absolute best players of the best teams because they're not going to sell. So it's extremely difficult. We all know that. Having said that, as we've seen in the Spurs documentary with Steve Hitchin, we know he's not a big fan of January transfer windows, which I think Spurs fans are right to be a bit annoyed at because it is his job and he should be doing more. We know that Levy does like to leave it and penny pinch a little bit. I don't think that's unfair to say. So it's difficult, but could Spurs be doing more? I think absolutely. There's got to be somewhere in between accepting it's difficult while also pushing to get deals done a bit earlier, spend a bit more money. I mean, look, the difference between spending an extra 5 million to land Traore, for example, and potentially missing out on 100 million by not qualifying for the Champions League. I think that's what Spurs fans are most frustrated by. It's the short-sighted thinking from Levy, which I don't know about you, but it must be frustrating for the majority of fans.
Alex, do you buy that excuse that Traore hasn't signed because he doesn't want to play right wing back?
Maybe not. Maybe not. I mean, there's more stuff coming out now that I don't know how true this is, but there's even rumours that he might have had a medical at Spurs and then Barcelona have come in last minute and he suddenly thought, right, I'll go to Barcelona. I couldn't tell you how true that is, but maybe it is just a case of Barcelona have come in last minute. It's a club he's been at before. It's obviously one of the biggest clubs in the world, no matter what you think of their state at the moment or their financial position. For many players, it is a dream to feature for Barcelona. It's a bit weird thinking how he's going to fit in their system. You know, they like to keep the ball. They like a bit of tiki-taka. How is he going to fit in? A very different type of player. But do I buy it? I do, actually. I do. I think it's a big ask for a player like that to suddenly go to an unfamiliar position. Not unfamiliar. He'll know how to play there, but...
the reason I asked that is because he has covered, for Wolves before in that position. And I just think it's so strange. Day 27, personal terms were apparently already agreed. So it just seems that, 4 weeks, for that decision to have been made and said, no, I don't want to play in that position. But of course, when Barcelona come in for you, who are you going to choose, Barcelona or Tottenham? Let's be realistic.
Well, I'd choose Tottenham, of course. But I know the majority of players would probably go for Barca, of course. Part of it does seem a bit like the whole Willian affair, doesn't it? Where we thought we had that over the line, the medical done, and then he slunk off to Chelsea at the last minute. Again, maybe that's the fault of Tottenham. Maybe they've got to start tying up these deals earlier, but it's a frustrating one. I mean, how do you feel about losing out on Traore? Are you particularly bothered by it?
The way I see it as a Spurs fan is that, I always want players to come in a window and walk straight into that starting 11. And I think Traore would have done that. And like you said it earlier about possibly replacing Bryan Hill, I am a little bit worried that the fact in the summer window, Bryan Hill and Emerson Royale, we are already talking about replacing the pair of them, and they only come in the summer. That does worry me slightly. Yeah,
I can see that. And it's ironic that Barcelona are now spending the money that we gave them for Emerson Royale on Adama Traore. It's all very strange, but I'd maybe still have faith in Emerson Royale. His end product is frustrating, but he's not been here long. I think he's a very capable at right back. We've seen glimpses of him being really solid, making good runs forward. So I would urge a bit of patience with Royale. I still think he could be a really good right wing back for us.
Yeah.
So that's the one positive I've got to take out of the whole thing, really. But it's not like we're just left with Matt Doherty now. At least we have got Royale there.
Yeah, I think the real positives are that Antonio Conte comes in and he does improve every single player. But of course, he wants it all now. He's a serial winner. He wants to achieve things at Spurs and certainly getting in that top 4. Alex, just wanted to ask, you touched on Antonio Conte's time at Spurs so far, but what have you made of the appointment of Conte, particularly after Nuno? And what do you think that he can achieve at Tottenham, given the tools?
I think as a supporter and as a journalist, Conte is everything you want in a manager. I don't think I'm going over the top in saying that. I mean, we all want to see a person who cares about the club, or at least he looks like he cares about the club as much as we do. And his antics on the touchline, I love them. I think it's brilliant. But it's not all just for show. I mean, I was lucky actually on Sunday at the Chelsea game. I was sitting in the press box, literally directly behind, probably a few inches from Conte. So I really got a good look close up. And just number one, it made me absolutely exhausted because the amount of energy he expends in a match, just marching up and down that touchline, gesticulating. But I feel like with some managers, it is a bit all for show, this whole, passionate thing. But he actually does genuinely instruct players, shows them positions. He has just as they coming out of the tunnel, actually, he grabbed Eric Dyer and had a quick private word with him. I like stuff like that, especially Dyer. He was coming back after an injury. And he's clearly a player who Conte has a lot of trust in, a lot of time for. Again, he was communicating throughout the game with Dyer quite a lot, and he's clearly become one of the leaders in his squad. But then on the other side, you've got this very thoughtful, pensive, kind of meticulous character in press conferences and in interviews. And I quite like that. I like that he has these two sides of him on and off the pitch. I think he's spoken pretty perfectly. He's not really said anything, but I've disagreed with in a press conference. He's absolutely been a breath of fresh air. When you compare him to Nuno, it's just chalk and cheese, isn't it? From both a fan and a journalism perspective. I mean, he often turned around and barked towards his bench in Italian. I wish I spoke fluent Italian so I knew exactly what he's saying halfway through the games. And what do I think he can get out of Spurs? I really do think he can bring us back to the levels of Poch. I really do want to believe that. I'm not buying this whole he's going to walk out if he's not back. So I really, really don't see it for a number of reasons. I think it will make him look just as silly as us if he walks out after 3 months. It'd just be what a waste of time for him as well as us. Secondly, I think Spurs fans have got to get out of this idea of an inferior complex, this whole we're really lucky to have Conte, he's doing us a massive favour. It's not the case. We're still an extremely attractive club to be at one of the best stadiums in the world, in one of the best cities in the world. He's getting paid very well. There will be funds to spend on transfers no matter what you say. The squad we've got isn't perfect, but he's still got a world-class centre-forward, a world-class goalkeeper. We've got the likes of Romero coming back. It's far from doom and gloom. So I don't really buy all this. Well, if they don't spend money in January, he's off. He's not off. He'll stay for 100%. And I think it's a good deal for both clubs. You've also got to bear in mind, if he did go, where would he go at the moment? You've got the Barcelona and Real Madrid jobs are nowhere near as appealing as they used to be. He's done pretty much Italy. He's done Inter and Juve. Bayern Munich are going very well with Nagelsmann. PSG, just can't see him going to the French league. There's always talk of United, but it just seems like they're not a good match, or the United powers that be just don't fancy him. So where else would he go? I think Spurs is the best place for him right now. Maybe that's me being optimistic, but I like to think that's the case anyway.
Yeah, let's certainly not talk about Antonio Conte leaving, Alex. No way.
But you see it all over message boards, people saying, oh, he's going to walk. It's just, I really, really don't see it. I'm happy to eat some serious humble pie if it does happen, but nah, not for me.
Alex, of course, you said about him evaluating this squad. What do you think his minimum requirement is in this window? Because I am, me as a Spurs fan, I'm expecting a lot to happen in the summer. But as I said, I'm not expecting a great deal in this window. But surely, the board must look at those Chelsea games thinking that we are a million miles away from our London rivals. So, 1 or 2 additions in this window could really make the difference.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it's going to depend who we can get out. This is, again, always the issue with Spurs. Are we going to be able to get rid of Ndombele, Lo Celso, Dele Alli? I mean, maybe we'll talk about that in more detail later. But I think now in this position, maybe at the start of the window, Conte would have demanded a bit more. Now, I think if we get Amrabat in, a player he knows, a player he likes, in the centre midfield, if we can get potentially a right wing back, I don't even think, I think people have talked about needing a centre back. I don't think right now it's, again, one of our most pressing concerns, simply because we've got Romero coming back. I think with him back and, a spine of him, Dyer, Sanchez, and we've got the options of Tanganga on the bench, Ben Davies can fill in. I think it's a signing that would be nice, but isn't as essential. If we get in, as I said, that centre midfielder, that right wing back, maybe Diaz as a kind of a luxury addition. If we get those 2 or those 3 in, I think Conte deep down won't be delighted, but will be satisfied and will think we can get this top 4 now.
Alex, are you surprised that we haven't signed any players yet on day 27?
No, I'm a Tottenham fan. I'm not surprised. I'm really not. I thought Traore might be done by now. Obviously, that has completely, that's disappeared. I've got to be honest and say, no, I'm not surprised. Nothing surprised me with Spurs.
The one thing that I'm failing to understand at the moment is that all of the journalists have told me that we need to offload players before we bring new players in. We haven't offloaded any players yet, but we are putting in a significant bid, although it's a lot lower than what Porto want, for Luis Diaz. Can you explain that to me?
I think there's just an assumption that we will get rid of players, which is actually worrying me slightly because it's not 100% sure whether we will. If I was going to be most confident, I think Ndombele will go to PSG before the end of the window. It looks like that might be edging closer, hopefully. Whether that involves a swap deal, that would be lovely with someone like Wijnaldum, but it's looking less likely. Probably more likely to be a loan till the end of the season with a certain amount of wages paid. I think Spurs are pushing for 100%. Unlikely to be 100%. It might be more like 80, 90, but I think an agreement will be reached at some point there. Lo Celso is a very strange one. I don't know how you feel about Lo Celso as a fan, but again,
Alex, let's get on to possible departures. Perfect timing. Let's talk about Giovanni Lo Celso, because I tell you what, I go home and away, watch every single Spurs game. I've found Giovanni Lo Celso a very, very disappointing signing. And I ask every single guest on this channel, what is his best position? And no one seems to know.
No, that's the issue. That's interesting to know, because obviously you see on, again, Twitter message boards that he's a very unpopular member of the squad, it seems, with fans. I was interested to know, how is he received in kind of the away end or the home end? Does he get a good reception still, or is there still kind of the people?
Well, it would be nice to see him on the pitch for 90 minutes, I must say, because a staggering stat that I saw the other day, between Tanguy Ndombele and Giovanni Lo Celso, they have only, between the two of them, they've only completed 90 minutes for Spurs on 16 occasions. That is not good enough for a pair that have cost Spurs £100 million, and particularly when the club are criticised so much that we don't spend money. And when we've spent money on these two, it hasn't worked out, has it?
That is staggeringly bad. I didn't know that stat, but it is awful. I mean, just all our signings. I can't think of a good signing from the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know if you can, but it's just, I just don't know where we've gone so wrong. Why is the scouting not being done more thoroughly? Why have we not had a look into these players' personalities and whether they actually have the mental ability to play in the Premier League? It's just baffling. But yeah, Lo Celso is arguably even more disappointing than Ndombele. I don't know if that's fair or not, but it's the fact that Ndombele has shown just occasionally those magic moments, the Sheffield United goal, I remember, and a few key passes, one for Kane against Liverpool this season, for example. But Lo Celso, I mean, really, what has he done? The odd goal in Europe, maybe, or in the cup competitions, but very, very little end product. He's been hugely disappointing. And there's talk about off the pitch. He's not a hugely liked character. He's maybe a bit volatile. I'm not sure if Conte really gets on with him. So I don't know what the answer is for him. Maybe a loan back to Betis, becoming permanent in the summer. But he's one of those that sums up just for how bad the transfer business has been of late, because he's been dreadful, really.
It's been heavily reported as well, Alex, the fact that Tanguy Ndombele, Dele Alli, Giovanni Lo Celso, combined £500,000 in wages every week. Now, do you think that clubs are going to come in for these three and cover 100% of their wages? Because Tanguy Ndombele, for example, £200,000 a week. It's crazy, isn't it? We talk about Spurs spending money again. You spend money on a record signing. You pay him really good wages. You put him on a contract until 2025. This is a big problem at the moment, isn't it?
It's a huge problem. In terms of those three, the reason I think Ndombele will go through is the fact that he is proven in France. We've seen him, turn up in France and play well in Liga. We saw him in the documentary how he's not really taken to life in London. It seems still doesn't speak the language very well. It seems like he would thrive and develop much better in France in a settled environment that he knows. So that's why. Also, working with Pochettino, he obviously didn't do great under Pochettino, but it's at least a man who he knows and a man who clearly still believes he can get the best out of him. So I do think that'll go through. Dele Alli is the one that I'm actually starting to really worry about his future. I think as Spurs fans, we all at this point want the best for Dele Alli, but I think we're all in agreement that that is not at Spurs. He's had chance after chance, numerous different managers, and he's not. We just can't find a place for him anymore. So I think with a heavy heart, we'd all probably say that this January is the time for him to go. But again, it's a question of where. I think there's Newcastle linked quite recently, but it now looks like they're going to go for this Bruno Guimaraes, who plays in a similar position, maybe even Jesse Lingard. And I just don't see them splashing out on Ali. I don't think they need him if they get one of those two players. So that leaves us with a handful of Premier League clubs who, if I'm them, I'm thinking, well, do I take this chance with Dele Alli? With the performances he's put in the last nearly 3 years now, he's not really been good enough. If I was a chairman, if I was a manager, I would be swerving well clear of Ali. And it breaks my heart to say that because we all know how good he can be, how good we've seen him. He was unbelievable back in the day, but it's just completely fallen off the track for him. And I hope he gets his career back off somewhere, but I currently just don't see who's going to take that risk, to be honest.
When was the last time you saw a good performance from Dele Alli, Alex? Because when I think of performances from Dele Alli, I think of the 2 goals at White Hart Lane against Chelsea. I think of the 2 goals at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea when we won 3-1 there, hadn't won there for 28 years. That wonderful goal against Crystal Palace. But the Dele Alli now to then is completely different, isn't it? Completely different.
It's tragic. Yeah, I was actually watching highlights of that Chelsea away game before this weekend, trying to G myself up, thinking we could get a result, which didn't prove to be the case, obviously. But yeah, he was unbelievable that day. Just his awareness, his innovation, the way that he'd do things that you just couldn't see being done. I remember another one, the Real Madrid game, where he scored twice against them at Wembley, and you thought, wow, what a player this young lad's going to become. I genuinely thought he'd be up there for Ballon d'Ors and England regular, really up there. I just can't put my finger on what it is, whether it's off the field problems, whether it's the burden of expectation. But as I said, I think he needs to do what Jesse Lingard did. He needs a loan. I wouldn't want to go to West Ham, obviously, for obvious reasons, but a team like West Ham, maybe I'm speaking off the top of my head there, but an Aston Villa or a team in that mould, I really would like to see him go there and would hope that he could build something back. But you can just see it. You just see it every time he's on the pitch now. It's the body language is just not there. It's languid. It doesn't look focused. He doesn't look in the mood. He doesn't look pumped up. And when you've had so many good different managers trying to get the best out of him now, Pochettino towards the end of his reign, Mourinho, Conte, Nuno, none of them could get a tune out of him. And it's disappointing. It's sad. It's the way it goes with players. But I just feel, especially with Ali, there was something there. It wasn't a case of a one-season wonder. He was had sustained good form for a good few years. And I just can't recall another player dropping off quite so dramatically. Can you think of another Spurs player who's nosedived so quickly?
No, and it's as you said earlier, we all love Dele Alli. We all want the best for him. I cheer for every single player and want him to perform for Spurs. He had a good performance against Liverpool, I will say, but it's strange, isn't it? I know he needs game time. So, the clubs being linked to him at the moment, Burnley, Southampton, Everton, Newcastle, Brighton. It'd be interesting to see whether he does get that loan move that I feel that he desperately needs, because I just feel that he needs a new challenge. I don't think he's going to get the game time at Spurs, certainly under Conte, because he wants players that he can trust and rely on in that starting 11. But Alex, just wanted to ask, Tanguy Ndombele and Dele Alli, if they do leave Spurs in this window on loan, do you think it will be with an option to buy at the club that they go to? Do you think we'll see either of those in a Spurs shirt again if they did leave in this window?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. It all goes back to Daniel Levy's little tricks, really, doesn't it? I mean, interestingly, he seems to be the main man who really still believes in Dele Alli. I think time and time again, there've been managers who have considered the option of sending him out on loan or selling him permanently, but Levy seems to be the man who stopped it every time and said, no, there's a player here. There's a marketable player, a young Englishman who's very popular. And it seems like he's prevented him from going out. Whether now he's finally going to accept defeat and try and recoup some of the money or get some money for him, I don't know. But sure, you'd would have thought that any team would say that they would want an option to buy for Ali. I mean, if he does go and is a star for someone like I said, Villa, Brighton, it'd be devastating for them to have to give him back. So I'd have thought that would be included. Having said that, maybe Spurs again would cling on to that last little bit of hope and try and avoid that at all costs. With Ndombele, I think it'd be similar. I don't know what transfer fee he'd go for now. I mean, the thing is that Levy would obviously want to recoup some of that, at least some of that 60 mil, but who's going to pay more than 10, 15 million for Ndombele at the moment? It's just not going to happen unless he absolutely tears it up in France, which is a possibility, but unlikely. Yeah, very tricky one. But in my list of priorities, I'd be trying to get rid of Lo Celso first, probably. Then Ndombele and Ali. Got to try our best, but I just think we'll struggle to get rid of him.
You think, Alex, Dele Alli in his prime, Real Madrid, £100 million. What would Tottenham sell him for now?
Good Lord. I mean, it's tricky because if you do sell him for a low price, I mean, we see the Dele Alli of old, then how stupid do we look? But I think if someone comes in with a bid above 10 million for Ali now, 10 to 15 million, you've got to be taking him out, haven't you? Considering just looking at his body language and everything, he just looks a beaten man. So yeah, I would snap someone's hand off if they bid 15 million for Ali now, sadly.
You mentioned Jesse Lingard earlier. Would you like to see him at Spurs? And another player, hopefully returning to the Premier League with Brentford, Christian Erickson. Are you surprised that Spurs haven't gone in for him?
No, I'm not surprised about Erickson. I think we do look back with romantic notions on Erickson, but the way I remember it is that by the last year or so, everyone was kind of fed up with him and ready to move him on, just because, again, he was one who his head wasn't at Spurs anymore. I think he was pining for that Inter Milan move for probably more than a year. Look, on his day, he was up there with the very best as well. When you talk about that Dele Alli game at home against Chelsea with the two balls Erickson put in for Ali were out of this world. I remember ones at Wembley in the semi-final as well. The one he put in for Ali, he was an unbelievable player. But no, I think we've kind of seen, we've been burnt by the don't go back thing with Gareth Bale. How much of that was Mourinho's fault is another question. But I tend to think once a player's gone, they're never going to be the player that you thought they were. Especially Erickson, we all know he's had his heart problem and whatever. We don't know exactly how fit he's going to be and whether he's going to be up for the rough and tumble of Premier League football. Hopefully he does go on and do well at Brentford. I'd love to see him do well, but I think it's for the best for all parties that he's not coming back to us personally. As for Jesse Lingard, that is an interesting one. I would be inclined to take a punt on Lingard. The only thing is I don't think United would sell to us. It seems to be reported they're very, very worried about selling to a rival and for him to go on and be great. And if they're not willing to sell to Newcastle or West Ham, and I really don't think they're going to go anywhere near us as a direct top four rival. So it's one of those, sounds like a nice idea with the old Jesse Lingard, who was so good for United in England back in the day at Spurs. I think he'd be a fan favourite. He'd go down very well, but again, it's one of those, I just can't see it.
Going back to Dele Alli, Alex, when we saw Lingard go to West Ham last season and, transformed him as a player and his season, do you think that Dele could have that in the Premier League with another club?
I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, we saw Lingard, everyone was a bit, unsure about the West Ham move, and he scored 2 in his debut, and that's all it takes sometimes. You just need the ball to bounce away or just a moment of inspiration. You're up and running, the fans are cheering you, you feel loved again, and then it could well be the case. If that is the case, again, are we going to look a bit foolish if we let Ali go and he returns to the Dele Alli of old? Potentially. But I think for all parties, it's a risk we've got to take now. He's clearly not going to find that form again here now. We've tried it enough times. We've given him enough chances, and it's just not working out. So it's just one of those. We're going to have to find out. We're going to have to take the plunge, get rid, and then maybe get burnt. But all the best to him. The best of luck to him.
The reason why I mentioned Erickson, because, of course, we've been missing an Erickson since Erickson left. And, of course, we need someone to take our free kicks because, of late, Harry Kane is still on the free kicks. Giovanni Lo Celso has tried to take the free kicks. We just don't have a good set-piece taker at the moment, do we?
This is my number one Tottenham pet peeve at the moment is Harry Kane on free kicks.
Yeah.
How is someone not just had a word and said, you know what, Harry, this isn't working. Other than the deflected free kick against Aston Villa, it is always consistently into the wall, over the bar, or a weak shot straight at the keeper. And I just cannot get my head around it. It's frustrating, and it's created an atmosphere of, rather than excitement at a free kick 30 yards out from goal, whatever, it's just for me anyway, it's a shrug of the shoulders and might as well get ready for a goal kick now. I mean, it's just atrocious. I mean, I quite like Son on corners. I think he's whipped in a few decent corners over the years, so I'm not so concerned about the corners. And if you remember rightly, Erickson was dismal on corners, always the first man. But yeah, you'd have thought, especially under a coach as canny as Conte, we would find a way to exploit set pieces a bit better. But yeah, if I have to see one more Kane free kick, I might just pack it in, to be honest, and I've had enough. Maybe that's my next angry article about Kane's free kicks.
Well, I was going to say, Alex, are you surprised that Heung-min Son is not on the free kicks?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't even remember taking one, actually. Do you? I can't.
No.
I can't imagine even.
He actually took one. It's the only free kick that he scored for Spurs directly, and it was in the Watford 1-0 win under Nuno. Oh, and it was meant to be floating the ball in, and it actually went in the net.
That's it. Yeah. I remember now. So, yeah, I mean, worth going. I mean, even like Harry Winks has done all right at free kicks. A few of them been maybe fluky ones. Again, kind of floated in over the keeper's head. But, so, I mean, honestly, anyone but Kane now. He's had enough chances. He can't do it. It just hasn't got the technique. Being a good penalty taker does not make you a good free kick taker. And we've got to just... So again, it sums up maybe the personality of the Spurs squad at the moment. Is there anyone strong enough in that squad to go up to Kane and say, you shouldn't be on this, I'll be taking it? It just seems like we've got a load of feeble characters at the moment, and we need some strength and someone who's going to stand up to Kane.
Well, talking about that, Alex, who do you think are the real leaders in that dressing room? Because, of course, we saw in the Amazon documentary, I love that show, by the way, taking us behind the scenes. But, in this current squad, who do you think are the real leaders in there?
Well, other than Kane, that's really the issue, isn't it? I think people have spoken about Højbjerg being a leader, but I tend to imagine him more as a leader on the pitch than off the pitch. I think he's one of those in the dressing room. I just can't imagine him screaming and shouting, really. I think he's tough and he gets stuck in, but I'm just not sure how much of a big leader he is. I like to think Dyer still is. I'd like to think he's been there a long time now. He's got a big presence. We know Hugo Lloris, actually, that was probably the biggest surprise, wasn't it, from the Amazon documentary when he had a pop at Son, because you just don't imagine that from him. But, I mean, look, he's a winner. He's a World Cup winner. It's a scandal he's not won anything for Spurs. If he still hasn't won anything after the next 2 years, his contract is going to be really sad, but he's never done it for Tottenham. But we certainly need some more leaders. We need some more of those players who are winners. We need someone who's going to drag the game by the scruff of the neck, take a ball, score a free kick, have that mental strength to go and do that, because we just don't have enough of those players. They just all seem too placid, too nice. You saw it coming off the pitch against Chelsea at the weekend, but there was no one looks that upset. It just looks like another day's work, and that's the disappointing thing. And under Conte, you're not going to survive long with that, because he demands, hopefully that's what Amrabat's got. It looks like he's got a bit of feistiness in him. He's maybe a player that Conte knows will bring that passion and that drive. But yeah, in terms of going forward in the transfer market, I think that's one of the main things we need to look at for attributes, that kind of leadership skill, rather than just, they've got a nice touch and they're a fancy player.
Alex, another player that we all thought that would be heading out the door in this January transfer window, Steven Bergwijn, up until that Leicester game. Do you still see him leaving? I
don't. I genuinely think sometimes one game can change an opinion. And against Leicester, that's enough to earn him cult hero status as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that was incredible scenes. And yeah, he's a weird one, Bergwijn. I've never really worked out quite how good he is, because on the one hand, he took those 2 Leicester goals brilliantly, but then we've seen him really frustratingly not convert when he should have done. I remember the Liverpool game's always one that sticks out in my head last season. I think we could have gone 2-0 up, was it? And he missed, and then we ended up losing the game. Maybe it was to go 2-1 up, I can't remember. Anyway, that was very frustrating. He's a player I like. I think you always get a shift from him. That's the thing. Will always put in 100%. But as we saw again against Chelsea, not always to great effect. He was back to being pretty anonymous. Had a tough job, to be fair to him, but he obviously didn't shine very much against Chelsea. So no, I think, especially with the position we find ourselves in, we've got to keep him. Really, we can't be selling him and Ndombele and Ali and Lo Celso. We just can't afford to do that. And I think Conte has now seen enough from Bergwijn to think he's worth persevering with at least till the end of the season. Whether we get an upgrade on him then is another question, but I wouldn't be selling him now personally.
Well, it's funny, Alex, isn't it? We talk about all these players leaving. Antonio Conte has got quite a thin squad as it is. Surely, if all of these players left, we would be in big trouble here.
Well, yeah. I mean, that is the worry. What if we end up selling 3 players before deadline day and then have no one in to replace them? I mean, you'd like to think that there's a plan in place, and if we are going to sell someone, we're almost guaranteed to get one in to replace. But no, you're right. We can't. This is the thing. We can't be selling too many players, and even though a number of them aren't good enough, we know they're probably not good enough for where we want to be. At the moment, it's just a lack of other options. We need to keep them for something. Especially if we go far in the FA Cup, which I hope we do. That's one thing we've not mentioned. I'd like to see us have a good FA Cup run. It's been far too long since we've won that tournament, which is so synonymous with Spurs. And we've got a relatively kind draw with Brighton. If we can get far in the FA Cup and should still be able to mount a top 4 charge as well, hopefully it could be a very pleasant end to the season. But you never know with Spurs, do you? We could go and lose our next game and it's all doom and gloom again.
Well, Alex, you nearly mentioned my favourite word, trophy. And I tell you what, lots of people always say about me mentioning trophies because 2008, our last trophy, far too long. How are you feeling about Antonio Conte lifting a trophy at Spurs? Do you think he is the man? Because when you go from Pochettino to Mourinho to Conte, surely one of these guys have got to deliver.
If Conte doesn't, then you have got to think who will. It's quite worrying, quite scary to think of that. If we end up getting through Conte and Mourinho with no trophy, where else can we turn? I'd like to think so. I don't think it will be this season. I think we'll fall just short in the FA Cup. But next season, I mean, the one criticism of Conte has got to be the Carabao Cup semi-final against Chelsea. The decision to rest Lloris and play Golini. I think all Spurs fans were baffled by that. And in general, the lineup for the first leg, you just think we've got good momentum at that point. Chelsea are having a bit of a wobble. Why are we not playing our very best team and going out there and really giving it a good go? I think that's what left a lot of people scratching their heads. And I still don't really understand that at all. I can understand him wanting to look at different players and get a different opinion, but surely he's seen enough of Golini in training to know what he's about. And you'd have thought a man as experienced as Conte would know how important it would be to start Lloris in that game. So it was disappointing, but he didn't take the semi-final as seriously as he could have done maybe. But I think unless he wins something, Conte will view his time at Spurs as a failure. It's that simple. It's quite clear that that's what the club needs. We need anything, a League Cup, an FA Cup, even a Conference League, although hopefully he won't be in it next season. He's got to win something. And if not, then he can't be judged as a Tottenham legend or he can't say that he's done the job as well as he could have done because that is the number one priority. And that's hopefully what we'll achieve very soon.
Alex, just while we've been talking, Fabrizio Romano has just tweeted the following. Tottenham are confident on the outgoings of Ndombele. He's expected to leave on loan. Same with Dele Alli. Ajax won't give up to sign Steven Bergwijn on a permanent deal. Loan plus buy option bid for Amrabat, ready since Sunday. And Luis Diaz deal still being discussed with Porto. That is the latest. What about Joe Rodon and Matt Doherty? Are you confident that both of them two will leave in this window?
I don't think they will, to be honest with you. I think Matt Doherty, Conte seems quite like him. I mean, he must have seen something in him. He's started plenty of games. He's been used a lot. He's not the level we all hoped he would be, but it seems that Conte's seen something in him to make him think, well, he's worth keeping around as a squad player. I think the only way he would have maybe left would be as part of a Traore deal, which is now dead. So I don't think he'll go. Joe Rodon, he's a strange one as well, because I was really impressed the first few times I saw him. When he first started making appearances in cup games, I thought he looked solid. He looked like he'd do a job. But again, feels like the last two managers haven't fancied him. They've clearly seen something that I haven't. And he's way down the pecking order now. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him get a loan, maybe back to the Championship or to a lower Premier League team. But I've got faith that he will come good at some point. It might not be at Spurs, but I still think there's a player in there. And it's quite frustrating that he hasn't showed his very best yet. Because, like I said, the early signs were there that he was going to be all right. But one of those, sometimes it just doesn't work out at certain clubs, and maybe he just needs something else now.
Alex, when was the last time you were really, really excited about a signing for Tottenham?
Like I said, Brian Hill actually was exciting. That was genuinely, I thought, a really good bit of business. I thought I was a bit sad to lose Lamella, but I at the same time thought the time had come to move Lamella on as part of that deal. I thought we'd got enough out of him. We'd seen what he could do. He'd given us lots of great memories, lots of passion, but to move forward, he wasn't really what we needed. And I thought Hill would be the future. And like I said, at the start of the season, all the signs were there. But since then, been very, very ineffective. It's been hugely disappointing. Other than him, I'll tell you what, Ryan Sessegnon I was happy with when we signed Ryan Sessegnon. And again, he's one that just hasn't quite made it. Obviously, he's had injury issues. He had that loan spell, which didn't really work out. Will he still be a player? I'm not sure. Again, against Chelsea, didn't offer much. Didn't really think he was on the level of where he needs to be. What about you? Last signing you're excited about?
Jurgen Klinsmann.
Going a long way back. Surely,
in 1994. I tell you what, that was a real statement signing. And the reason why I say that is because we signed a world-class player at the time. Rafa van der Vaart, you could say that about him as well. But at the time, signing a world-class player, I just feel that we're way overdue as Spurs fans with a world-class signing walking through the door. And I want to feel that excitement again.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on Van der Vaart. He was the first one that sprung into my head. Berbatov, that was very exciting. I feel like he was on the way to getting world-class then. Luka Modric, again, I suppose that these weren't world-class players at the time, but you could tell that they were well on the way to becoming world-class. This is a frustrating thing. I feel like we're at the stage now where we could be building a world-class team and buying world-class players. We've got the facility, we've got the manager, we've got a very, very attractive proposition to players. It's all just about the debate will rumble on and on. Is Levy ambitious enough to match that? Is he wanting to build a world-class team, or is he more focused on NFL games and off-pitch matters? That's the debate that Spurs fans will continue to have until he leaves the club, probably. But I'd like to think that the signing of Antonio Conte as manager was a statement that, we are going to be willing to compete, and maybe in the summer we will splash out a lot of money. But one thing's for sure, we simply have to take advantage of having Conte at the club, because there's been plenty of comparisons made. It's like parking a Mercedes-Benz in a farm or something like that. I mean, it's like you got to give him the tools to succeed, and at the moment he hasn't got the tools, but he's trying his best. And I just can only hope that we sign a few players in this window and then go all out in the summer, and then we could be set for a very, very exciting 2022-23 season. But knowing our luck and knowing after everything I've said today, he'll probably walk out of the club in a few weeks. So don't get too excited.
Well, I was going to say, Alex, when you have a world-class manager in Antonio Conte, because he's a serial winner, he wants to win. Even in a friendly, he will want to win the game. He is that type of guy. What is the definition of fully backing Antonio Conte in the summer? Because, like I said, I'm expecting big things in the summer. I want world-class players in the summer, as I'm sure he does. Do you think it's realistic?
I think it is, especially if we get the Champions League. Obviously, if we get Champions League, there's absolutely no excuse to not go out, splash for cash. There'll be players who will be delighted to join Spurs if we are a Champions League team with Antonio Conte at that stadium next season. But if we manage to achieve that, we should be looking at buying, in my opinion, 3 or 4 or even 5 top quality players, and not ones that are plucked from a list of priorities, ones that we've missed out on the top targets. So let's get 3rd or 4th or 5th. We need to be going out, make a statement, getting in those transfer sort of priorities nice and early, splashing the cash. And then I think if they did that, then Spurs fans can have no complaints with Daniel Levy. But if we continue to just scrap about trying to get bargains, cut price deals, then, Spurs fans are well within their right. After all this time, 1 trophy under Levy, it's not good enough. I think this is a pivotal few months, few years even. and it's got to change.
Alex, just want to ask as well, the fact that before Antonio Conte arrived, I think a lot of Spurs fans on their list of players to offload in this window would have included the likes of Eric Dyer, Ben Davies, Harry Winks and co. Since Antonio Conte has come in, he has improved these players dramatically. Now, just wanted to ask as well, if we don't do any business in this January transfer window whatsoever, how confident are you that Antonio Conte can improve these players from now until the end of the season and finish in that top 4?
If we don't bring in anyone, I would be severely, my confidence would be depleted, let's just say, because you need something, even psychologically, to get in 1-2 players, freshen things up a bit, have some new faces around the changing room. You do need that. If we end up with nothing, it's just going to go so stale. And we've seen Conte pushing the players as much as they can. I don't think he can push them that much more. I mean, there's only a certain level with the likes of Harry Winks, Højbjerg are going to reach, and then it's just going to become impossible. So if we sign no one, I think top 4 is ambitious, but possible. If we sign a couple of players, I think it's more than possible. I think it's dare I say probable? No, I'm not going to say probable, but it's much more likely anyway.
Alex, just want to also ask you about Harry Kane. Of course, at the start of the season, there was all the saga whether he was going to sign for Manchester City. Do you think that he would be looking for a move in the summer again, or do you think he will finish his career at Spurs?
I honestly think that ship has sailed. I just don't see who's going to pay the money that we'd ask for Kane now. I think he seems very motivated, very happy under Conte. He might not still be his absolute best, but you feel like he's getting back to that point occasionally. I honestly think it was last season or nothing, and I think that's why it was so important that he didn't go, because I just don't see where he's going to go. I don't believe that City really will push the boat out and get him this time when they missed out on him last season, especially another year older, another few maybe injury niggles. I mean, City don't particularly look like they've missed him as such. So why would they spend a similar amount on a player who's a year older? I just don't see it, especially when you've got the likes of Haaland around, who are much more shrewd and a much cleverer business in the long run. My estimation of Kane hasn't really gone down as a person. I think at the time he probably was within his rights to push for a move. But has he tarnished his legacy with some Spurs fans? Potentially a little bit. Having said that, if he leads us to a trophy, if we end up top 4, all is forgiven, and I think he'll still go down as one of our best players ever, for sure.
Alex, are there any players that you've heard about that Tottenham Hotspur could possibly sign that we haven't covered?
Not that I can think of. That's one of the saddest things, really. There's not really any options that I could tell you that we haven't gone through. I mean, look, there was talk of, like I did mention earlier, Wijnaldum or Draxler or something like that in a swap move for PSG. But I think that was more wishful thinking than anything. I think they were more wild rumours than anything particularly substantial. So no, listen, I'm hoping for a last-minute Van der Vaart situation where a name just pops out of nowhere. But realistically, I think it's going to be 2 or 3 of the ones we mentioned: Amrabat, Diaz, or maybe a right wing-back who we don't know yet.
Alex, last 2 questions for you. Where do you think Spurs will finish at the end of the season? And a simple yes or no, will Conte lift the trophy at Spurs?
Spurs will finish 4th at the end of the season, and Conte will lift the trophy at Spurs. I hope that's what you wanted to hear.
I love your positivity. Is that honest? Are you being honest?
Genuinely, I'm probably more confident about the 4th place finish than a trophy, to be completely honest with you. Only for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I just don't think United and Arsenal are that good, and I think we are slightly better. But these days trophies are so difficult to win. We've seen it in even the Carabao Cup. Not this season, but the last, 4 Man City have won it with their reserves. I mean, it's becoming increasingly difficult to win anything. So that's why, especially now that Newcastle might enter the equation with all their millions and billions, and City are only going from strength to strength. Liverpool, Chelsea, still very good. That's why I'm hesitant to say he'll win a trophy, especially if he's going to only be here, let's be honest, 2 or 3 years max. But top 4, I think we'll do it. I reckon.
Do you think Antonio Conte will be at Spurs for very long?
If I was a betting man, I think at least till next summer, as in he's going to have at least one full season. And it's all going to depend on how that season goes. If we back him, if we spend, if we're in the top 4, I don't see why he'd want to go. If we struggle, he's very likely to walk. But I'm very confident at least a full season we're going to get of him, and we've got to enjoy it while we can.
Because every club he's gone to, he's used to spending money and he's used to lifting trophies. So surely, you know, in the summer, surely he will want a squad being very, very fit, want an excellent squad in there to be challenging for the Premier League. That's the way I see it.
But the way I see it is it's almost a different challenge for him now. He's proved he can go spend money, win league titles. I see this as a different managerial challenge. He's picking up probably the worst team he's ever inherited in his career. He's got limited funds to do it. If he now goes and wins something with Spurs, that to me is a greater achievement than winning Serie A with Inter Milan or winning the Premier League with Chelsea. That for me is a sign of a true managerial great rather than one who's very good at signing players, world-class players and winning the league. So from his perspective, I think he's got to see it as just a different challenge and another addition to his CV, the fact that he can say, I took Spurs from a really bad point, made it competitive again, and then either achieved top 4 or won a trophy. That to me is a much better achievement.
Well, Alex, I can't thank you enough for all of your time. It's been great talking to you and wonderful input this evening. So thanks very much, and tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
So I'm Alex.Milne_92. And yeah, of course, follow the Express for all the latest on Spurs' hopefully not doomed attempts to bring in a player in the coming days.
Well, Alex, I love your positivity. 2 or 3 players, I'll be looking out for those, and top 4 and a trophy under Conte. I'll certainly be looking forward to that, and fingers crossed. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you on the video later on this evening for a Tottenham news video. Stay safe and well. Come on, you Spurs.